Let's finish the job. This was the message by President Joe Biden during his 2023 State of the Union address to members of Congress. This was his first address to the members of Congress and the American people since the Republicans took over control of House of Congress. He pushed them to pass progressive and ambitious pieces of legislation that was started before the midterms. The questions are that we'll look at is this an effective push by the president? How effective can he be? And are these issues still relevant to the American people as we move toward the 2024 presidential election? This is E.W. Claville, and on this episode of the Claville Report Synopsis, we'll discuss this and other important issues. Hi, this is E.W. Claville, and this is the Claville Report Synopsis, the 2023 State of the Union Joe Biden recap. The State of the Union is a very important speech made by each president every year to the members of Congress and also to the American people. The State of the Union address not only sets the tone, but it also gives a clear and direct message to members of Congress, those working within the administration, those across the world, and more importantly, to the American people to let us know the direction that the White House and our leader of our country would like to see us go into. Over the course of years, we've seen the State of the Union address become a lot more and sometimes a little less. During the times of war and crisis, it's an opportunity to galvanize people around a common issue, to bond us, to unite us in order to overcome crises and adversity that faces our country. But in the times of peace, it gives an opportunity for presidents to tout their achievements and also their party's achievements as they push toward reelection. But in the times where the president himself is experiencing a low rating or maybe a scandal, it's an opportunity to tell their side of the story. Well, in this particular 2023 State of the Union by current President Joe Biden, he did a combination of touting successes and also helping to guide and set the agenda moving forward as he gets ready for re-election. The pitch was, let's finish the job. So what job is the President Joe Biden discussing or talking about? Well, first of all, let's look at this in context. This is his first time addressing the members of Congress since Republicans took over the House. Kevin McCarthy, of course, is Speaker of the House, and we know that that was a very tumultuous and trying time for him to become Speaker of the House, given his party dynamics. But he is Speaker, which means he has an opportunity to dictate the direction of the House of Congress within itself and the members that represent different parts of our nation. But it's also an opportunity for the president himself to push his agenda and to tell his side of the story. Repeatedly, according to NPR National Public Radio, he stated, let's finish the job. Let's finish the job. In this address, he said that there's so much more to do. He talked about pulling lawmakers to pass legislation as relates to policing reform, immigration legislation, codifying abortion rights, capping the price of insulin at $35 a month. And not only that, but also pushing members of Congress to act toward foreign policy issues as it relates to Ukraine. Now, let's take a look at a couple of these issues and priorities that the president discussed. Now, keep in mind that this president himself is the oldest president in the history of the U.S. at 80 years old, still going strong. And he also said his intentions is to run for re-election in 2024, which will make him the oldest person to run for election or re-election of the highest office of the land. And if re-elected, again, setting a record to be the oldest person elected or re-elected to the office and also to serve as president. But he utilized this speech to draw a contrast between him and also the Republicans. He talked about wanting to commit to the full faith and credit of the United States of America by raising the debt ceiling so that our full faith and credit is not questioned. Now, if you remember, if during the times of the Trump administration, the Republicans pushed the Republican president, and Republicans pushed for some of the largest increases in spending. Now, of course, we know that this was during the pandemic, and of course, Democrats also worked on the CARES Act, but there was even more spending before that. But now the Republicans don't want to raise the debt ceiling. That's one thing that President Joe Biden pushed as a contrast, that now it's time for us to raise the debt ceiling to ensure that the full faith and credit of the United States is never questioned and that we can continue to operate the way that we've always operated to provide opportunity and access to citizens. Some of the pushback and the contrast to that would be, well, if we have this large debt ceiling, how do we now become more efficient? How do we now slash certain spending? How do we ensure that programs and services that are cut don't impact the people that really need it? And we can really attack what's called the pork or the fat given to individuals or entities that don't need it. Well, trust me, this is easier said than done. We've seen this in many presidential administrations, and of course, we're going to see it again now leading up to the election of 2024. There's also was a call for police reform passage. Now, all of us witnessed the murder of George Floyd at the hands of police. It was a horrific video. It's still horrific to this day. And it was a moment in our time where it struck the conscience of not only our country, but the world. When others said that African Americans and other black people were not being subjected to horrors at the hands of police, the George Floyd murder simply struck all of those myths down. And we see where many individuals, corporate side, police departments, law enforcement, all said, and community, it's time for a collective reform. Many worked within their own foundations to provide forms of change and opportunity. But the major push for change was halted in the halls of Congress themselves. That's where the George Floyd Policing Act was halted from being passed because some felt that it went too far. Well, President Biden brought up once again in light of the killing of Tyree Nichols at the hands of police, the beating in which led, of course, his injuries led to his death. He said, what happened to him, Tyree in Memphis, happens too often. We have to do better. His mother nodded while in the chamber. Will this be another watershed opportunity for Congress to act in a way that passes this very important policing legislation, this act? Will this be a moment that is simply wasted, going aside, so that we say once again, well, woulda, shoulda, coulda, and we have to wait once again for someone to die at the hands of certain police or law enforcement unjustly in order to push this criminal policing, this policing reform act through? Only time will tell. But in addition to raising the debt ceiling, the financial outlook of our country, in addition to passing police reform, the president also touted low unemployment rates and the economy getting back on track. Once again, during the global pandemic, we saw our nation retract, the world retract in its ability to create economic gains. Well, that's understandable because global supply chain shut down, society shut down, we were all shut down and gone home. This happens. It happened to us. And it happened to everyone. But we are resilient as Americans, and we have the advantage of having the world reserve currency, the largest economy in the world. So we were able to buffet against a lot of that. But still, a lot of jobs retracted, the economy retracted. Well, we continue to add jobs. Where if you go around your community, you'll see wanted signs, hiring, increased wages, fast food now, and minimum wage catching up to what's called the living wage, a living wage which was fought by community organizations for years finally have the opportunity to have a decent salary where they can actually live. But he also talked about, again, and touted as polls have stayed low, he appealed to his track record. Again, jobs, various projects being funded, public projects, optimism for society as a whole, supporting veterans, ending cancer, and also beating the opioid epidemic. He said, to my Republican friends, if we could work together in the last Congress, there is no reason we can't work together and find consensus in this Congress as well. Fighting for the sake of fighting, power for the sake of power, conflict for the sake of conflicts gets us nowhere. In our democracy, it works because everyone can have a voice. Different factions, different interest groups, different constituencies, all can come together, voice their concern, and push their representatives to do what is the right thing for their communities, and ultimately to provide opportunity and access to everyone in the country. That's a message that will resonate after this State of the Union and the next and the next. It's the ability for us as a country and individuals to compel our legislators, our representatives that represent us, to pass legislation to impact our lives for the good. Well, 2024 is coming. Re-election is right around the corner. What will happen? What will transpire in this presidential term? What will happen during this Congress, when every member of Congress will be up for re-election in 2024 as well, and some U.S. senators? What will be the temperature of our society as it relates to political fray and the fallout? What will be the outcome? Well, stay tuned and we'll see. This has been E.W. Claville, and you've been listening to this segment of the Claville Report Synopsis.